What does it really look like to walk the road with someone, to come alongside someone in their faith journey, life on life along the paths and pitfalls that come with being a human? I think Jesus shows us. I know Jesus shows us, and it's not only a path we can take, it's a path worth taking. Discipleship can come in many forms. Many of us have or will chose for our family to be the most important journey we take. And it should be. Unless you're like Paul, who writes in 1 Corinthians 7, I say this as a concession, not as a command. I wish that all people were as I am. He means not married. But each has his own gift from God. One person has this gift, another has that. It's a given that we should seek to invest the biggest part of our discipling capacity to our family. However, and due to the commissioning of Jesus, I suspect that we're capable of much more. This brings us to an incredible method for being a disciple who makes disciples. It's not rocket science. It does not take a higher educational degree. It does not require you to have any title but the one that you were given the day you were saved. That title, that identity, is Christ's follower. From that day forward, you are called to love him and to love others. You're to share the saving message of Jesus near and far. Just like in 1 Corinthians 1:11, you are to call people to follow you as you follow Jesus. It's quite simple. The model's right there in Scripture. Jesus puts together a perfect structure, and his followers wrote it down like a manual for discipleship. He chose 12 people. Yes, I know one of those was a rotten apple. But because of solid leadership and example setting, that one apple did not spoil the barrel. Those 12 men became part of an adventure that changed the whole world. John is very clear at the end of his gospel that if all that had been done by Jesus had made it to print, there would not be enough books to contain it. I am betting at least some of that unwritten stuff was the time spent in that group of 13 people. They did not just happen to show up at the same places at the same time in the biblical narrative. No, Jesus had chosen them and then called them to follow him no matter where he went. They lived life together. They served together. They laughed, cried, and ate together. Jesus journeyed with them, and in that journey, we see the method. You see, Jesus was the greatest teacher who ever lived. And some of his best teachings come out of how he himself did things. The model of how we should walk the road with others is what I call the 3-9M rule. It's easy to remember because we see it in Scripture multiple times. First, we should invest in 3. On many occasions, we see Jesus pull away with his 3, Peter, James, and John. They were allowed to be present at some of the most powerful moments in Jesus' life. In Matthew 5, they were witness to the raising of Jairus' daughter. In Matthew 17, we see them present at his transfiguration, where he was shining like the sun and interacted with Moses and Elijah. In Matthew 26, we see him take them to the Garden of Gethsemane, where his heart breaks for the world, and he takes on the responsibility of dying for each and every one of us. These 3 men, were trusted with more time, more teaching, more authority. Now, mind you, with this type of investment, we also see moments of rebuke and correction. Our time is too short to venture into all the times Jesus needed to correct these 3, but with great influence comes more accountability. On to the 9. Jesus' model to us was the shepherding of 9 people. You need only to look at the Gospels to see the moments where Jesus broke free from the crowds to ask deeper questions of his disciples. He would guide them into understanding, call upon them for continued commitment. He would say things like, "What did you hear? Or do you understand?" He sent them into service, and when they returned, he would answer their questions and broaden their view of his Father's kingdom. The unwritten things that John speaks about, and that this is only speculation, but I don't think it's sacrilege to say that those fireside chats, while between towns and villages, were rich and life-changing for the 9. Finally, we come to the M of the 3-9M rule. It stands for masses. Jesus found time to impact the masses for the gospel. He shared in crowds about his Father's kingdom. He healed, fed, and ultimately died among the masses. He cast a large net during those moments of impact. Some heard and were changed, some observed and went about their business. And then there were some that were watching for the purpose of his destruction. You have that same call. You may never stand in front of thousands proclaiming Jesus. You may never miraculously feed 15,000 people, but don't underestimate your influence in a crowd. People are always watching, and maybe for the same reason Jesus faced. It is our calling to be light wherever we go. You will and are called to impact the masses for Jesus. Now for the convicting question. Are you doing this? It's not a strong suggestion to be a disciple who makes disciples. It's your commissioning. Matthew 28 is very clear when he quotes Jesus. Go into the world and make disciples. Remember, it's not rocket science. Anywhere along your faith journey, you can do this. Did you just come to know Jesus? Find 3 close friends to have coffee with regularly and tell them how Jesus is changing you. Have you been walking with Jesus for a few years? Maybe it's time to lead a Bible study of students to walk more closely with Jesus. Are you confident in your identity as a Christ follower? Maybe it's time for you to live out your faith more publicly at work or at school so the people around you, the masses, might ask why you are different. If you're an older Christian, and I just don't mean your chronological age, I also mean your depth in Him, it's time for you to find someone to walk this road with. It doesn't need to be fancy. Here's one story of how I have practiced this method. Years ago, I had the privilege of walking the road with a high school student who was young in his faith. It was so hard to gain his attention in all the normal ways. Youth group, Bible study, young life. I finally said to myself, this kid has potential and I need to invest in him as one of my 3. I dug into his life to find out the things that excited him. It turned out to be really spiritual. He loved cars. You thought it was going to be something like deep theological theory or a debate about doctrine. Nope. It was motor and gasoline. Once I knew the road into relationship, I did what all good Christians do. I devised a plan to incorporate cars into a really deep Bible study. Wrong again. I invited him to hang out with me in my garage. We spent weekends working on cars, and more than once he helped me clean up my garage. It was a win-win. But it wasn't the cars or the free labor. It was the conversations, the relationship building. He saw the way I treated my wife. He saw me get mad at silly things and then correct my behavior. He felt safe enough to ask the tough questions or ask questions that he would never have asked in front of his buddies. That kid went on to lead others in ministry. And I even got to officiate his wedding. Motor oil and Jesus. Nothing fancy, just time. You can do this. You have something to share that is worth the sacrifice. Are you going to do it? If you need help, let me know. I'm sure we can find a garage or a dinner table or a road to walk with someone. But only you can own this part of your faith. You need to take the first step. Over the next few weeks, you're going to hear about some possible ways you can journey with people. We'd like to have a place where people can share their skills or wisdom to disciple others. We already have some folks who have joined us in this journey. We have someone who is gifted at sharing vocational skills like interviewing and resume building that will walk alongside those who are willing. We have financial advisors who want to help those that need to see how God can and should be a part of their money. Maybe you have something that can connect you with other believers to help them grow. This is not just about sharing a skill. It's about building relationships and then living life together where you can share a bigger picture of Jesus. I hope you see how easy it is to be a disciple who makes disciples. He has called all of us to say this: follow me as I follow Jesus.